guys, it's Kel, and welcome back to my channel. Our co-host here today is the lovely Rio, who this video is actually about, because I'm sure a lot of you were wondering from my return video where I mentioned that last month Rio almost died. I'm sure you're wondering what happened, so I'm going to make that story time video with my little co-host today, who's going to sit on my head apparently. What are you doing? You're supposed to be in frame. You're supposed to be in frame, dude. What are you doing? So this happened on the 7th of last month, so October. And it was probably one of the scariest animal-related emergencies or animal-related situations I've ever been in. But that afternoon I was getting ready to go to work and I noticed that something looked wrong with Rio. Like, he was very dull, his eyes looked very just dull and kind of cloudy. Just kind of dull and cloudy, and he just looked like the lights were on but nobody was home. He kind of looked roughed up and just kind of was like lethargic. And I'm like, that's not good. So I took him downstairs and I was like checking him out. I'm like, what's going on here? And I syringe fed him some water because he seemed dehydrated. Like, you could see like the skin around his eyes were like very wrinkled, and the skin on his feet, you can like pinch it and it like didn't like elastic go back, like how if you pinch skin it goes back. It wouldn't do that. It was like just, he was like dried out. So I don't know what happened. He had fresh water. I always change his water once in the morning and once at night, so I don't really know why he would be dehydrated unless he just wasn't drinking. But I took him downstairs and I got a little syringe and I syringe fed him water. And he kept throwing it back up. He couldn't keep it down. He would take some of the water in and he'd throw it back up. Take some in, throw it back up. I called the vet and they were packed that day and there was no way they could get me in for a emergency situation, and neither could any of the other avian vets or emergency vets at that time. It was around 4 o'clock-ish, I think it was, 4:30, something like that. Yeah, it was probably 4, because I had to be to work by 5. But they couldn't get me in anywhere, so I'm freaking. I'm like, this bird is going to die, and I need to figure out what I can do to try to save this bird. And for anyone wondering, age would not be a factor in this because Rio's only 5 years old, which for a green cheek conure or any parrot, that's very young. So age had nothing to do with it. His cage was clean. There was nothing. I couldn't figure out what had caused it. So I went on YouTube really quick and I'm watching videos like basically how to keep my bird in like intensive care at home until I can get him the next day to the vet, because they'd be able to take him as an emergency the following day, but there was no place that day I could get him in at. So I seen somebody on here, I can't remember her name, but if I can find the video I will link it down below because she really helped me, and that video, I think, is what saved Rio, to be honest. And she recommended to get Gatorade because of all the nutrients and stuff, and to syringe feed him the Gatorade. So that's what I did. I took him to work with me in like his little carrier, and I stopped at the store on the way to work, got the bottle of Gatorade, and I just kept syringe feeding him Gatorade, syringe feeding him Gatorade. Try to get him, and he looked like he was doing better. He still seemed like not great, but he looked like he was coming around. Like, he was starting to walk around the cage, which I forgot to mention, before he couldn't even walk. And he wasn't throwing up as much of the Gatorade. Like, he still would throw up, but it wasn't like all of it. Like, you can tell he was keeping some of the Gatorade down. So I kept doing that. And he went to work with me, came home from work, and I had him on his little play stand because he looked like he was getting grip back. He was doing really good, and I thought, well, I'll put him on like the low part of his play stand and just kind of like keep an eye on him because I would not let him out of my sight. And one of the most scariest things happened. He looked like he was gonna fall off his perch, and I reached out to grab him. And step up. Let me see if I can show. I reached out to grab him, and I put my hand... He's not going to let me do it. Whoops. Okay. Okay. I put my hand on his back like this to stop him from falling, and his one wing went up. And he kind of was like holding his wing up. Like, then both wings were up, and he kind of was like holding him up. So I thought he was kind of like being silly, because he kind of was like, I don't know, it just, I don't know, I thought he was being silly. And when I went to set him down, he kind of fell to his side, and he couldn't put the wings down. And I'm like, what is going on? And then he proceeded to have a full-blown seizure. His head was twisted, his like twisted, and he was going like in a circle, a full-on seizure. I panicked. Thankfully, my parents were both there, and my dad grabbed him in a towel, wrapped him up, and I just bawled my eyes out, crying, holding him, because we were pretty certain he was in, like, death roll. That was his death roll. He was dying, for sure, and I was certain he was dying in my arms that night. I was a mess. Everyone was a mess. He laid there for a while and started gasping. Bubbles and liquid were coming out of his nose, and he was just gasping for air, and I definitely thought he was dying, and that just broke me. Thankfully he didn't. As you can see, he's still here being a dick. He started to come back around after that, after about an hour of that, but he didn't have any grip, so we thought he had stroked. About an hour after that, so 2 hours from the seizure, he started to regain grip and was able to like perch and stuff again, which was a relief. I kept him in a carrier, his little gray carrier, and I put him on the side of my bed, barricaded it with pillows, and kept his Gatorade next to me, and woke up every night on the hour to syringe feed him more Gatorade to keep him hydrated until early the next morning, when I was able to get him in at the vet. They took him for a emergency consultation, and I didn't have any answers. I told them what happened, and they took him, put him in an incubator, and I had to leave. They literally said, we have a packed schedule, we will keep an eye on him, and we will run some tests between other clients, and we will call you later. So that was really hard, having to leave him there, not knowing if I would ever see this bird again. I was just crushed, thinking that was going to be the last time I was going to see him, because he still looked so bad. The vet called probably around 3 o'clock-ish at this point, and basically told me they didn't know what was wrong, and it didn't look good. Basically to prepare that this bird wasn't going to make it. I broke down big time at that point. I literally couldn't stop crying. I just couldn't stop just crying. I was just so broken over it. I was like, we were supposed to, Rio's only 5 years old. We had a lifetime. We still had like years and a lifetime to spend together, and it just was heartbreaking. I told him to continue running any tests that they could, as long as he was comfortable and he wasn't suffering, to continue to do everything they can to figure out what was wrong. So first they thought maybe it was a bacterial infection. That scan came back, the fecal matter scan, that came back negative. It was fine. He had nothing wrong with, no bacterial infection. They had to keep this, like, space the tests out so they wouldn't overstress him to the point that he would die of stress, because birds do that. Birds could just keel over from stress, and being he was in bad shape to begin with, they didn't want to push it where he keeled over from stress. So they'd give him like break time in between. They had him on IV fluids and had him in an incubator, and they kept running different tests. They ran a x-ray on him to see if maybe he had accidentally ingested something like a piece of metal from his cage or something and actually had cut himself, because they were starting to see blood in his stool. So they thought maybe he accidentally ingested something and he was cut and internally bleeding. And that came back fine. There was nothing foreign in his body. That was totally fine. And finally they did the blood test, and they ran a full blood panel on him, and they finally got back to me around 6 o'clock-ish, 5 or 6 o'clock that night, and they told me that he was in the early stages of liver failure, and that they were going to continue to try to see what they could do. They gave him some medicines, all kinds of different. He was on, like, here's his paperwork. He was on, like, all of these different medicines and stuff, and they put him on that, and they were going to keep him overnight. And then they ended up keeping him a total of 2 nights, because I think they ended up keeping him a total of 2 nights. Trying to check this real quick, see what day it was that I picked him up. Yeah, so they kept him 2 nights at the vet clinic, and I got to pick him up the 3rd day, the morning of the 9th, I think it was. Yeah, the morning of the 9th, I got to go and pick him up because he was doing way better. With the medicine and everything, he was coming around, he was doing amazing, but he needed to stay on these medicines for like 2 weeks or something like that. Sorry. So he had to stay on these medicines for like 2 weeks. They were like, as long as you're comfortable giving him these medicines, you can take him home and give him the medicines yourself. And so I went, I picked him up, had to give him these medicines 2 times a day, and he had like these, like the little syringes, you'd put like 5 different medicines in one, and then you had like 5 at this time, and 3 at this time of the day, and 2 at this time, and it was just like a lot of medicine, and Rio hated it, obviously, because Rio's kind of a dick, and he took all the medicine and never had another seizure. He was doing good, doing perfectly fine. He has been doing perfectly fine. Finally, on the 29th, after he had gone through all the medicine, was acting totally normal. I also forgot to mention they said to add more calcium to his meal and to up his veggie to pellet ratio, because they said that could have been it. Also, it could have been because I didn't realize at the time, but no, because that was another thing. His calcium was super low. They had to give him like a calcium injection thing. I don't really know, but they had to give him that, and she told me to make sure I added extra calcium blocks to his cage, which I kind of had given up putting those in because, one, I thought it was only female birds that needed the cuddle bones and, like, calcium blocks, but apparently not. She told me to get one of the lights, like you can see on his cage back there, the avian sun UV bulb thing. So I got him that. Changed up his diet hugely. He's not thrilled by it, but he has to eat a lot of greens, and he's, not that happy about eating his greens. He still throws them out of his bowl and screams and throws a fit. But you gotta do what you gotta do. It's that or death, buddy. So they gave him all of the medicine, changed up his diet, did all that, and on the 29th, when I took him back for another blood panel, because they wanted to check it, his blood work came back perfect. So, in conclusion, I don't know what caused what happened. The vet doesn't even really know what caused it caused him to have the beginning stages of liver failure, but thankfully, parrots are very good at being able to repair their liver with proper medicine and nutrition, and it was actually up in the air if Rio was going to have to stay on the one liver medicine for life, but apparently it worked and his liver was fine. His liver levels were perfectly fine now. His calcium levels were good. I got his calcium back up, and the vet gave him a clean bill of health. The only thing that we think happened to cause all of this was I was in a tight spot financially well, I'm always in a tight spot financially, but I was in a really tight spot earlier in the year, and I bought bird food on clearance at I think Pet Supply or something, but I bought the food in clearance because it was like really dirt cheap, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't his normal food, but it was still pellets, and it was fine, I thought, and I brought it home, and I keep his food in like a sealing Tupperware type container where it like opens up and like it locks and stuff, so it seals it and keeps it really fresh. And I just poured it in with his other food, closed it up, and because he had like a little bit of his regular food left, put it in there, closed it up, and I was like, okay, cool, he's got food. I was like, I didn't think anything of it because I didn't even really know bird food expired, to be honest, but it was like close to the expiration date. That's why it was on clearance. And it wasn't until this happened, we were trying to figure out what could have caused it, and I went to go check through his food. Someone had mentioned go look, see if like if food went spoiled or something. And I went through his food, and I discovered that apparently his food must have spoiled. It had tons of little maggots and flies like in it, like not on the top where you'd like reach in and scoop it out. So, I mean, it wasn't like I would have just seen it when I opened the container, but it was like once you started digging through it, it was very dusty, and there was a lot of like little maggots and stuff in it. So I definitely threw all that out and went to Petco and spent like $60 on buying him top-notch, expensive, highest quality food I could find for him. And now I keep it in a separate bag inside. I keep it in a bag inside the container so like nothing can get into it. So possibly the food spoiled. That's the only thing that we have come to the conclusion that we think happened, was the food spoiled, and that's what caused all this. But that's what happened, and I am so grateful. I am so grateful that my sweet Riri is still here and got a clean bill of health. Yeah. Yeah. And Ria wants to say hello to everybody. Say hello. Oh, thank you. You pooped on me. He pooped for you guys. That's very nice. That was nice, Rio. Thank you. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And please, if you have birds, check your birds' food more often. Alright? Till next time. Bye.